Hello, everybody. This is a presentation to help you with your final year dissertations, and it is entitled Top 10 Tips for a First Class Dissertation or Research Project. We tend to use the word interchangeably between research project and dissertation or consultancy project, but for the purpose of this video, they're kind of the same thing. So, a couple of bits of advice before we start. This presentation is generic advice that's presented in addition to what your tutor might tell you. Always stick to what your tutor says as opposed to what this video might say. It's designed to complement as opposed to replace what you've been told by your tutor, and it's presented in addition to your normal supervision. So it's extra as opposed to in place of. So, tip number one of 10 is play to your interests. What are you interested in? And this is the most important thing, and it might not sound that important, but we can't emphasize it enough. If you're not interested in your project, that will show. Your tutor will lose interest, you'll lose interest, and it won't be as good. So, when it comes to picking your project, what do you want to do? What do you want it to be about? A couple of things to think about might be your future career. Where do you want to work? Did you do a placement? Could you go back there? Have you got a hobby that's really interesting? Or what was your favorite module to date when it comes to your studies? Um, the future career one's a really good one. Every year I have students that get a career based on their dissertation, based on their project. So if you want to go and work for a particular company and you think you could got some access to that company, do it there, try and work with them, and then when you walk into an interview, you've got so much more to tell them. You can teach them about their company, and that gets people jobs. Equally, placement, same thing applies. Do you want to go back there? How do you really step it up? Um, and secondly, hobbies are a great way to start. I've had loads of people do hobbies, football, NFL. I had a great skateboarding one a couple of years ago. That's why that example's there. I have people that want to become teachers and they pick teaching and use their peer group around them as a sample for their research. So the top tip number one is play to your interest and pick something that you're interested in, because a dissertation is a long journey and you will get bored with it if you find the topic boring. Number two, trust your tutor. I've already mentioned this, but your tutor comes first. They are there to help you. So your tutor will give you advice for your project, and this will probably be different to the advice given to other students with other projects. Don't compare that advice. It's not the same because your project is different. If your tutor is telling you that quants or quantitative methods or qualitative methods are best, or mixed methods are best, trust them. Just because that tutor has told somebody else to do it differently has nothing to do with your project. So trust your tutor is tip number two. And then number three, a really important one, and depending on your institution, you may or may not have this, but consult your marking criteria. It's the most important thing to look at when it comes to how to get a good mark. It's what we use to mark, it's where how you will get your feedback, and it's a list essentially of all the things that we're looking for from your work. So if you've got one of these things missing, you're going to miss out on a whole bunch of marks. So for example, this is our marking criteria for our module, and the first thing it asks for is clarity of research question and clarity of objectives. And you can see to fail the project, the objectives might not even be specified, they might not even be told what they are. And every year, without fail, in the final edit, in the final piece of work, one student out of a cohort of 100 will forget to put their question in their work. And as soon as you point it out to them, they can't believe they've done it. So tip number three is consult your marking criteria and make sure that you understand every part in it. If you don't, speak to your tutor and really make sure that you're doing the right things to hit the higher marks. I always look at the 80 column. I always check at what needs to be done. And that's my first port of call whenever I have to write anything academically. Number four, directly on that point, how have you answered your research question? So tip number three was all about make sure you hit the criteria. And a big part of most criteria in dissertations or research projects will be how have you answered your research question and objective? Now, If your research question and objective is not clear, it's practically impossible for you to answer it well. So they need to be clear. And then secondly, it shouldn't be a surprise. It shouldn't be a secret how you've answered them. So here's an example of a little piece of a table that's been presented in a conclusion of someone's work. And as part of the general conclusion, this person has created a step-by-step table of all the different objectives, explaining, firstly, what the objective is, number one, number two, and number three, how that objective has been answered, a short explanation as to how that objective has been answered, and then thirdly, evidence as to where that can be found. So page 14, page 20, page 28, page 28, page 33, page 31, page 9, and additional supporting evidence in the appendices. So when your marker is looking at your work, they are under no doubt whatsoever that you have answered your research question and you have answered your research objectives. And if we go back to tip number 3, consult your marking criteria, the first part is asking, question and objectives for the project have been clearly specified, are fully relevant, and they have been fully achieved or even surpassed. Now, if you're presenting a table like this, and what's inside it is correct, and you have actually done what you have said, it's practically impossible for your tutor not to give you an 80% plus or 70 to 80% for that section because you've fully achieved it. So really make it clear how you've answered the question, and just to avoid doubt, tell them where they can find that information. Tip number 5, really important tip, this one, is a connection between chapters. And this is the difference between a 70 and an 80 or a 68 and a 70. Your chapters don't exist in isolation. The introduction isn't something that is written, parked, and never looked at again. Same for the literature review, same for the methods, and same for your findings. These are just 4 examples of your meatiest sections in your dissertation or research project. The introduction is the context, it's the scene, it's everything about the project, and that will influence what literature you pick. The literature you pick will heavily influence the methods that you pick. So if all the literature in your area is quantitative, based in North America, using questionnaires, based on nurses, based on students, I don't know, that should feed into your methodology, into your methods. So the method that you pick isn't a surprise. It's not just because that's your favorite method. It's because the literature has guided you that way. And you need to make it clear in your methodology that your literature has helped you. Then onto your findings. The introduction will influence what you found because it influences the context. What you have found will probably be influenced by the literature and it will link to the literature. There will be a connection to the literature. And then perhaps you can tell the literature something. So for example, if you're using Herzberg's two-factor theory, which was developed in America, you might study that in the UK with students or with a small business. What can you tell the literature about what you have learned from your findings? How can you extend Herzberg's model? How can you extend someone else's work? So the chapters do not exist as individual standalone pieces of work that can be slotted out. They overlap and they inform each other, and that should be clear in your work all the way through. Number 6, really easy one, clear questions. It's so frustrating as a marker when we read work and the question is either not in the report or it's not clear. Sometimes we will read work 5, 6, 7 times to try and find the question. I've even been known to do a control F to try and find something with a question mark on the end to make sure I've not missed it. It's such an important part of your project that it should be absolutely unmissable. So here's an example of a whole page that is basically dedicated to a research topic and a research objective. So make it clear, make it stand out, make it absolutely unmissable in your work. And then that is what you can use for your table at the end to prove that you've answered them. There will be no doubt that you've answered them if you follow this approach. Number seven, and we've already hinted at this on number five, but your research methods should inform your literature. So the method that you choose is not because you think a questionnaire is the easiest or you think an interview is the easiest or the quickest. It's because the literature has guided you in that way. So, for example, this is taken from Mayer and Allen in 1991. And the way they have proven commitment, the way they have investigated commitment, is by using hypothesized antecedents from 337 full-time, non-unionized employees in three organizations. Great. That's what they did. There's some clues in there. They used a questionnaire. They went to three places and they've carried out some correlation analysis. So heavily statistical. If you were to read further into the literature in this topic, you would find that it's all statistical. It's all based in North America. It's all case-based. So that can inform your approach. If you want to use quantitative approaches too, fantastic. That's going to back you up. If you want to use qualitative approaches, great. That's going to help you too, because you can explain that all the research has been conducted in one tradition. So it's about time different research was conducted in a different tradition. So don't think of research methods as only existing in research methods textbooks. Research methods exist within your area as well, and you might as well, to get the best marks, pull that out and use that to help you. That's number seven. Number eight, such an important one for all work that you're ever going to do, excellent referencing. It's so important to get this right, and it's so easy to get this right nowadays with the tools that are available to us. So download Mendeley, download RefWorks. It's never ever too late. Mendeley is my favorite. I think it works really well. With it comes to Mendeley, you can download the program and drag all your papers into Mendeley, and it will catalog them for you. Insert the plugin into Microsoft Word, and it will take control of your referencing for you. It works, it's clear. Referencing is worth a huge amount of marks for you in any piece of work. No referencing equals probably no marks. So referencing your work is essential, and having a systematic, thorough approach as to how you do that is absolutely essential. So download RefWorks, download Mendeley, get a piece of software that will take control of your reference management for you. And then number nine, best marks for the best methods. There are no better marks for using one method or another. There are no better marks for using a questionnaire or an interview or a focus group. Trust your tutor when it comes to your methods. Be guided by your tutor. Think about what kind of method your question needs. So for example, here are two fictitious questions. Number one, investigating the causes of commitment in small business. It's looking for causes. It sounds quite numerical to me. Cause, effect, numbers, statistics, correlation, it all ties in together. So that's going to help you with your methodology approach. Secondly, how do employees feel about their employers in small businesses? Now, that feels quite qualitative to me. How do people feel? You're going to need to interview people to find that out, probably. And that might be a focus group, it might be a normal interview, it might be a group interview, I don't know. But those questions have got bias inside them, which is fine. But in order to have the bias, you need to work with them and give them the method that they need. If you had question number two and you were doing correlation analysis or regression analysis, it wouldn't feel right. It doesn't mean you'd fail, but it probably means it's not a high quality, high class piece of work. It means you've misunderstood the basics, and that screams out of your work for a marker. And then finally, point number 10, a really important one that can help you to get to those high grades and pull out the quality in your work, and it's create a model. So this is just an example of an activity that I do with my students. We give them a transcript between Donald Trump and the Australian Prime Minister, and they're having a conversation about the issues that affect them. And what we get our students to do is to thematically analyze those conversations. And out of those conversations often comes the following themes: relationship, history, focus, refugees, religion, and terror. So, this is just one example of a conversation that two world leaders once had. And you could present those themes in your findings and leave it at that, and that would be fine. There's probably a good mark in that. But to get the higher marks and to do better, it's important to think about how do these things interact with each other. So, is there a relationship between the themes themselves? So, if you were presenting this as your findings and you said, well, actually, there are two factors here. There are things that enable the relationship, and there are contextual considerations to take into account. And they're two separate things. You might even go as far as to say it's similar to Hertzberg's two factor theory. You can't have the context without the enablers. So it's really important to think about how does your themes, how does your findings relate to the wider question? And does a model help you to do this? The good thing about a research project is that nothing should be a secret. Nothing should be a surprise. So you can have this right up front. You can have this in the introduction to your findings. It can really help you. And when it comes to answering the research question, which we've explained is very important, for the objectives, you could even have, for number 4, we created a model to demonstrate how this is true, how this is a fact, how this is what we found. So these things all tie in together, and these things are all supported by thorough reading, excellent attention to detail, and hopefully by following these 10 tips for a first class project, you can go all the way and get that great mark and finish off your degree or master's degree in style. Good luck. I hope it goes well for you, and over and out.